Okay, welcome back to another Python video. Today we're going to talk about one way that you could have multiple constructors in a class in Python. And I'll also show you what happens when we do it like you might see in other programming languages. And if that sounds cool, feel free to subscribe. That way you don't miss any future content. You guys have been killing it with subs lately. I really appreciate it. If you like this video, feel free to like. It also lets me know that you like the content. And if you're looking for a crash course book in Python, one that I personally use to get started in Python, I'll have a link down below. Feel free to check it out or check other things out on Amazon. It helps out the channel, and I truly do appreciate it. But enough of the plugs. Let's talk about a class. So we're going to create a new class here. I'm just going to call it calc. It's going to be like a calculator class. And let's show what happens when we have multiple constructors without any kind of logic. So let's create a few init methods. So I have one init method here, and we're just going to print out number 1. And let's do this a few times. So if I do this again, and I do this again, instead of number 1, we're going to do number 2, and then number 3. How do we know which one of these gets run? Well, in Python, what actually gets run is the very last constructor ends up overwriting all of the previous. So if I create a new object, so CA is going to be equal to a new calc object. Let's save this and run and watch it print out number 3. And just ignore that this file is called dog. That was from our previous class video. And here we go. It ends up running the last init method because this one will overwrite any previous init methods. So what's a way that we can kind of get around this and have multiple constructors depending on what the user puts into that class instantiation? So what we want to do is we want to have just one init method, but it ends up doing multiple things, and that's dependent on what the user passes in. So we're going to keep self, but we're also going to pass in args with an asterisk at the beginning. And I made a video a couple back, and you can go check that out. It talks about what this means. Basically, asterisk args is just a variable number of arguments that can be passed through. Maybe it's 1 argument passed through, maybe it's 10 arguments passed through. We don't know, and we're just saying just accept any amount. So let's say the user passes in multiple numbers into calc here when they go to instantiate the object. We want to handle that and add them up and put them in some kind of property. So what we can do here is we can say if the length of args is greater than 1, meaning they passed in more than 1 argument, we're just going to add them up. So we can say self dot sum is going to be equal to the sum function of args. And so when we create the CA or the calc object, let's pass in 1, 2, and 3, and then down below, let's print CA.sum. Let's run this. And down below, we get 6 because 1, 2, and 3 added all together are 6. Now, of course, there's a flaw here because we're assuming that the user is passing in all numeric. If you wanted to, you could loop through each one, and before you add it, you can make sure it is an integer or a float or some kind of numeric value before adding them, or you would get an exception. But here we're just going to assume they pass in all numbers. Okay, that's great, but this is basically the same as just having a single constructor. What if we also allow them to pass in a string, and then the calculator spits out some kind of sentence with that piece of string? And let's say that they can also pass their name when they go to instantiate this class. So we can say else if is instance, and we talked about this in the last video. What this function does is you can pass in some kind of data, and then the second parameter is a data type, and if that data passed into the first parameter is the data type of the second parameter, it'll come out as true. So we can say args of index 0, and is it an instance of a string? So is it a data type of string? And if so, we can say self.sentence is going to be equal to, so our string is just going to be an f string. It's going to say hello, the first argument passed in. So args index 0. And now instead of all of these numbers, what if we pass in a name like Tom and we print out dot sentence instead, what does that end up looking like? And here it's hello Tom. So what's happening here is we can either pass so far some numeric values, some multiple numeric values, or we can pass in a string and it'll handle either of those instances with a single init. And you can keep going, right? You can probably think of endless possibilities here. So let's just do one more. So we have another else if. Let's say it's an instance of the first argument is an int, and we just end up doubling it. So self.double is going to be equal to args 0 times 2, and let's put 10 down here, and then instead let's print out ca.double. And print this out, and now we get 20 because we passed in. It went to this else if statement, and then it said yeah, because if it were more than one, this if statement would catch it. And this one obviously didn't because it's not of type string. So this is going to handle it and say, let's just multiply it by 2 and set double equal to that. So I'm going to clear this and we're going to have multiple objects. I'm going to have ca1, we'll print ca1.double. Let's do ca2 is equal to a new calc object, but instead we're going to pass in multiple numbers like this. So let's print that out. So ca2.sum, and then lastly ca3 is going to be passing in a string. So Sam we're going to pass in, and let's print out ca3.sentence. So now we have 3 different objects instantiated with 3 different constructors, and we can show how each of these is going to work differently depending on what was passed in. So this first one only had one integer, so this caught it and multiplied it by 2. This one had multiple arguments passed in, which we are, like I said, assuming those are numeric, and we add them all together. And this one right here had a string argument passed in, and so this else if statement caught it and handled it. So this is a way that you can have multiple quote-unquote constructors, even though we have actually just one init in our Python class. Hopefully this helps you. If you were curious about this and this all makes sense, feel free to make your own class and try different constructors like this. And yeah, thanks so much. Hope to see you in a future video.